You're going to squeal a little. Oh, you could do it. Wow. Okay, we won't make you do that twice.
Yeah, it's been a weird CES. At least that's the vibe I'm feeling after watching Jensen Huang flirt way too much for my liking with a server rack and Lisa Su spend what felt like an eternity saying yada flop. Really, I don't have time to go through all the weird AI things that were said, except to maybe point out the funniest thing I thought I saw was all of this bragging about how a company could remap what AMD's office looks like to be Egyptian or whatever, but their own AI couldn't even make the AMD logo correctly. Now, that's where I'm going to stop pandering to the AI hate, though. Although I would love to share in it with you all. And I know that a lot of you are looking for that. If you check the live chats, oh boy, are you all tired of hearing about AI, and so am I. So, while I'm not going to hate on it overly, I'm also not going to spend a lot of time on it. In today's video, I do want to point out the things that stood out to me as impressive, but also things that disappointed me. Everything from AMD's new X3D CPUs to Intel's, in my opinion, and I'll get to it soon, surprisingly very impressive Panther Lake chips, and, well, to some big disappointments to a few things that actually didn't end up getting announced today. But before we get to the disappointing stuff, let's actually start out with some of the positives that you might not have missed, specifically, first of all, from the AMD press conference during that MI455X section that, to be fair, if you do care about AI, did look pretty impressive and did look like AMD is continually catching up to NVIDIA in AI compute more and more, although still not being quite at their level. In that section, Lisa Su talked about Zen 6 Venice, and, well, she confirmed a leak that this channel put out quite a while ago, namely, not just the core count, but the actual configuration down to the die level of Zen 6 Venice, and that is that it has two IO dies. I've been told that those should be 375 millimeters squared, and then attached to those chonky boys are 8 32-core CCDs for a total of 256 cores. Now, outside of that, it kind of felt like she didn't say much more than this will be the best, but if you actually look at some of the details that have been put out by AMD today, you can reverse engineer that once you account for the core count increase from 256 cores over the 192 cores that Turin had in the previous generation, well, a 70% performance increase, you're talking about something here that should bring around 30% more performance per core. And that's not a ton of detail, but that is enough, I think, to confirm further the stuff that I've been leaking about Zen 6, namely that it will be quite a dramatic performance increase over Zen 5, and not just because it's increasing core counts on desktop, on AM5 that is, from 16 to 24 cores, but also because with that 50% core count increase, there will be a massive per core performance increase as well, which should lead to possibly up to around double the multi-threading performance and wildly higher gaming performance. I just thought this was an important thing to touch on here because, you know, Lisa Su putting out these details that confirm some of the things I've already said about Zen 6 should give you all more confidence in the more, I don't know, wild sounding to some people claims that I made about that architecture. It does sound like quite a monster. And speaking of monsters, Zen 6 Venice wasn't the only thing that Lisa showed off today. There was also the new 9850X3D that, yeah, kind of seems like in the middling area of my expectations so far. You know, I've heard some pretty impressive things behind the scenes if you can get really fast memory with it. But of course, right now, nobody can buy memory, so it doesn't seem like AMD's focusing on that, if that ends up being true. But at the same time, it doesn't seem like a 1% improvement, and so I don't have that much to say about the performance of the 9850X3D because, well, we don't know the cost. If it's $480, $500, I'll be like, yep, I don't know, it's faster for slightly more money. If it's $550, $600, and it turns out it can't run faster RAM, then yeah, I'll probably say, but until we know that, all we can say is AMD already massively has the gaming crown, and they're going to more massively hold it moving forward with the 9850X3D. But I don't know about the 9950X3D too. Now, this was something that I'm not going to back down on, saying that I know AMD just gave a bunch of presentations behind the scenes about it. So I'm not sure why this wasn't shown at CES, although I did tweet out before the end of the conference that I was hearing that they might have pulled it. And so far, it looks like that might have happened. And so what I can say is this. If AMD did cancel the, better binned dual V-cache 16-core flagship, if they have canceled that for this year, and who knows, it might just be delayed, but if they did cancel that, I can easily explain why they probably did it. Number one, if you're AMD and you're thinking about what's coming out from Intel, well, Arrow Lake refresh isn't going to be a big threat. In fact, we didn't even see Intel really talk about it at their press conference. And in addition to that, even if Zen 6 Desktop is delayed, like I've suggested it might be from this year, and AMD has to compete with Nova Lake, well, I got to be honest with you, the 9850 X3D is enough ahead of Arrow Lake right now that I think it's plausible it trades blows with Nova Lake in gaming, or at least gets close enough to be considered in the same ballpark while costing probably half as much, the 9850 X3D that is, compared to whatever flagship Nova Lake has. Well, that worked before. AMD could have launched a 5950 X3D with Zen 3 when Alder Lake came out and smoked Zen 3 in performance, but they didn't think they needed to because the 5800 X3D was all AMD really needed to continue to sell their AM platform against a, on paper, better Intel competitor, but a competitor that was seen as not worth the extra cost. And so in a year where AMD is obviously focusing on AI above everything else, maybe that's the decision AMD made. That would be my suggestion if the 950 X3D2 does end up never coming out. The only other suggestion that I could possibly make is that they expect Nova Lake to be a bust, and if Nova Lake is a bust, they don't think they need a multi-core flagship against it either. But we'll just have to wait and see. That is what I would suggest is probably going on with that somewhat of a surprise non-announcement there. And, let's be honest. When it comes to what gamers are telling AMD, if you check the Amazon CPU bestseller, it is that gamers basically want 8 cores and then sometimes 6 cores and every now and then the flagship. Because of this, AMD may have also said, hey, the sales data suggests people don't really care for more than 8 cores right now, so why would we waste more chiplets on a product that's just going to pull away from, well, the 9850 X3D, a product that will continue to make people buy new platforms just as often as a 16-core that would waste more Vcache chiplets. Actually, if we go back to that Amazon CPU bestseller, yeah, if you'll notice, Intel is not in the top 18, and in fact, if you continue to go down, they don't even really crack the top 20. They get around there with their 10 nanometer relics, but Arrow Lake is nowhere to be seen. And it's on this note, this demonstration that I'm showing you here, of just how far Intel's mindshare has fallen with enthusiasts, to where they have to struggle to even get in the top 20 best-selling CPUs, to where a bracket for AM5 is outselling all Intel processors on Amazon. It's through that lens that I want to talk about Panther Lake after this ad break, because if you ask me, people aren't as hyped for Panther Lake as they possibly should be, and I will explain why after an ad from Micro Center. That's right, this piece of content is sponsored by Micro Center, and right now they are having a winter savings event that rolls through all of January. So if you check out a link below, you can find a link to their latest winter savings, and then they also are opening up a new Micro Center in Austin, Texas. That's right, as usual, if you sign up for information to check out their store, you can get a free 128 gigabyte flash drive when the store opens. And then on top of that, they have multiple links to other things. They have a link to the latest deals and a link to the latest news. And they want me to stress this because Micro Center has told me that they see prices changing up and also down throughout the year. A lot of surprise announcements possibly coming. And so if you want to stay up to date on what the latest prices and the latest products are, you can do so through the links in the description. And outside of that, I don't really know what else there is to say. I'm very happy that I've had Micro Center as a major sponsor for years now. They're easy to work with, and they're important for this community because I do believe if you can get to one, even if you have to drive a couple hours, you almost always will save money compared to most other, or if not really all other stores. So please support Moore's Law is Dead by checking out Micro Center through the links below today. All right, now moving on from AMD to Intel Panther Lake. I actually have quite a lot of good to say about this year's presentation, and I'm surprised that I do because last year's, well, it may have been rock bottom for Intel presentations. I don't believe I even bothered to cover it that much publicly. I mean, I did a die shrink for Moore's Law is Dead fans where the thumbnail was just that guy in the big shirt saying yep, and that's because it was a lot of underwhelming announcements. Well, someone just kind of stood next to guests and went, awesome. Yep, that's amazing.
With no additional purchase necessary.
It's awesome.
And there was really not that much to say outside of making fun of the presentation. Not so with this year. This year, I felt like Intel, honestly, compared to AMD, and certainly compared to at least NVIDIA's first conference of the day, they got straight to the point and told you about their products. And their number one product that they talked about, Panther Lake, that's coming out this month. And I also applaud Intel for having a somewhat firm release date. It looks pretty dang good. And I'm surprised that the live chat was basically just poo-pooing Intel when they were, from what I could tell, making their most impressive CPU announcement that they've made since Alder Lake. That's not to say this will be as big of a deal as Alder Lake was for its time, but it is to say that that's the last time I think people got super excited about Intel. Maybe Raptor Lake, but it's hard for me to bring up Raptor Lake now that we know that they're all basically ticking time bombs for breaking your desktop. No, that's not the case with Panther Lake. In fact, my biggest concern with Panther Lake right now would be just how big the claims are. And I don't mean the efficiency claims. I leaked multiple times that I expected Panther Lake to bring like flagship laptop CPU performance down to Lunar Lake power consumption. So their big claims about efficiency, not surprising to me, especially compared to AMD's CPUs, because AMD's using, frankly, vastly inferior and cheaper nodes compared to the chiplets that Intel will be using with Panther Lake. No, what I'm concerned about is these massive claims they've made about graphics performance. Now, to be fair, I did expect Panther Lake to be double digits faster than Gorgon Point in integrated graphics, but they're making, I would argue, at least the way they presented it, bigger claims than that. They're claiming that they will compete directly with RTX 4050. They're claiming that they are 73% faster on average than a Strix Point APU. And by the way, if you'll notice, they claim a bigger number for their performance increase over Lunar Lake, showing that Intel is finally admitting that Strix Point was actually faster than Lunar Lake, not slower. And so I don't have that much to do here when it comes to like breaking down that information. And that's because I did notice some red flags. Like, for example, there was one slide where for some reason Intel was giving their CPU more power while simultaneously using a weaker version of the AMD APU, even in some apps where it would definitely hurt AMD's performance to have the 10-core 12 CU model instead of the full 16 CU flagship, whereas Intel has their flagship offering. That really sticks out to me. Actually, another thing that stuck out to me is when I looked at some of the performance notes for their graphics claims for the integrated graphics of Panther Lake versus AMD's existing Strix Point APU. I noticed that they were using quite a bit faster memory. You know, DDR5 9600 RAM, where Lunar Lake was using slower 8533 and Strix was using a lot slower 7500. Now, some of you might say, well, Strix Point doesn't use RAM that goes up to 9600 megatransfer. Yeah, but at least I can find a listing from HP right now that says 8533. That's like around a 14% increase in bandwidth, which is really important to the integrated performance of AMD's APUs that tend to be a bit bandwidth starved. And so when I see something like that, I go, well, I don't know. I'm not telling you this is what the outcome will be, but it's plausible that Intel could be cooking their books by about 10%, choosing the games that favor them the most on average. And so maybe their on average gaming performance with integrated and Panther Lake is about 10% less than what they said. And then Strix here could be performing about 10% faster. And you average those out, and all of a sudden you go from this like wild claim of like a 70 or 80% performance win, and maybe it just starts shrinking to 60, 50, 40, 30%. I don't know. But I will say this. No matter if they are cooking the numbers a bit or not, I think we can safely say Panther Lake is going to crush Strix Point in integrated graphics performance and almost certainly beat Gorgon Point in double digits, possibly by 30% or more. Like this, I don't think from what I'm seeing here that Intel has cooked the books, so much that what they're portraying as like a 60 to 80% win is really a 5% win or a loss. I don't think that's how drastic it is. And I think that's a good thing. Because Intel really, and I mean really, needed a win here with Panther Lake. And at least it seems like briefly they will have one against Gorgon Point. And I also think it might be enough of a win for this to make sense. Now, by that, I want to be clear. Panther Lake will not make sense if it wins by even a whole 10%, maybe not even by 20%. And that is because it uses way more advanced packaging, multiple chiplets on way more expensive nodes compared to Gorgon Point. Winning by even just 20%, I don't think will matter because those Gorgon Point systems will probably cost quite a bit less. But I think Intel might have enough of a win here to really do well against that and hold up against its real competitor, something that I've talked about before. I speculated last year that these rumors of more Strix Halo models, this is AMD preparing stuff to compete directly with Panther Lake because that's who Panther Lake's real competition should be. If you look at the cost to manufacture the 2 to 3 chiplet Strix Halo, all on 4 nanometer compared to the much more expensive nodes and more elaborate packaging that you see with Panther Lake, really in terms of cost and advanced features, Strix Halo is the competitor to Panther Lake. But again, it seems here, though, that Panther Lake will have its niche. Yeah, look, Strix Halo, even like the 388 that's like cost optimized for gaming, 8 cores, 40 compute units, even that model, it will win gaming, I believe, against Panther Lake. But it won't win by enough that you won't want to consider Panther Lake for its greater efficiency and more modern features. So, yeah, I'm saying I kind of think Intel had the best press conference at CES, and I think that in terms of hardware, Panther Lake, right now for me, has me the most interested. And again, just bring it full circle. That's why I'm a bit shocked at how dismissive everybody was in the live chat of Intel compared to what I saw with the other conferences in the comments or in Discords or Reddits I was following. And I think it's because when you look at, for evidence of this Amazon CPU bestseller, Intel's mindshare is just at rock bottom, and people don't even notice anymore when they seem to have an actual winner like Panther Lake. All right, that's pretty much going to do it for this video. I don't have that much to say about other things, other shocking things, although not that shocking to me. Battle Mage, nope, no B770. I mean, I'll be honest, I'm told that it should eventually come out in some form, but not seeing it at the initial Intel CES presentation is just another huge red flag to me. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe by the time this video comes out, they'll have already talked about it in another press release or something. I think that's quite plausible, but the fact that they're still not willing to talk about it, even on the first day, tells you that either it's not ready or they don't think it's very good and they don't want to put it next to Panther Lake that they think is very good. Either way, I don't think it's really worth paying attention to. I mean, the analogy I would make is, what if AMD was teasing RDNA 3 in 2022, like they were, and then they didn't unveil their flagship until like this month? Like, should anyone really care about a 7900 XTX launching now? I don't think so. But anyways, we'll see what happens with that one. And another thing, DLSS 4.5, only thing I will say is it is about time NVIDIA had a dynamic way of inserting frames and not forcing you to run at lower frame rates at all times. But outside of that, I'm just going to save that for the upcoming Broken Silicon and other pieces of content because I'm tired and I don't think, I think we'll need a lot more information to come in before we can fairly judge that. But of course, once that information does come in, you'll be able to see what I say about it if you are subscribed to this channel. So please do make sure you're subscribed to Moore's Law is Dead. Ring the bell button if you're on mobile. Give us hype points. Comment down below. Share this. Sharing these videos helps so much. And then also consider supporting us on Patreon. If you do, you can ask us questions like we just had a defense engineer on. Patrons got to ask him questions even at the lowest tier. You get access to tons of bonus content. A new die shrink will be coming out this week as well. You'll be able to participate in that. So please, if you have the extra money, we really can't do this without our patrons. Please make sure that you support us there. And otherwise, well, if you made it this far into this video, thank you for watching.